Hello, and welcome to Sip Sip Hooray, the podcast for wine lovers and people who want to know more about this magical beverage and the people who make it. Family wineries are a standard in Europe, but in America's relatively young wine history, it's unusual to find families where a winemaking and farming tradition has been handed down through the generations. But winemaking and farming are definitely in our guest Scott Caraccioli's blood. He is the fourth generation carrying out a beloved family tradition. Caraccioli Cellars has its vineyards in the famed Santa Lucia Highlands and a tasting room in Carmel, where we are located today. We are the two Marys who like to eat, drink, and be merry. I'm Mary Babbitt.
And I'm Mary Orland. Scott and his family put Monterey County on the map when it comes to sparkling wine. His bubbles have been compared to top cuvées from Champagne and have won numerous awards. But Scott would tell you that his bubbles are uniquely Santa Lucia Highlands, uniquely Monterey County. Spend some time with Scott, and his passion and encyclopedic knowledge of grape growing and winemaking can't help but impress you. And of course, his wines always impress. But while Scott is known, and Caraccioli Cellars, of course, is known for sparkling wine, it's also becoming known for Syrah and Gamay, and we will find out more about this evolution from bubbles to still wines as well. But don't worry, there's plenty of bubbly to go around. So Scott, welcome to Sip Sip Hooray.
Thank you, and appreciate it. Happy to be here, Mary.
So we're so glad that you're with us today, and I love that this is in your blood and you know, this family tradition. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so my family has been agricultural row crop farmers for generations, and that's been our focus, and we still do that full bore from my brother and cousins and uncle and father. And then I kind of fell backwards into a project that they started, my father and uncles, in terms of taking less than idyllic ag land on the valley floor outside of Gonzales and developing it into a Chardonnay and Pinot vineyard that we ultimately believed would be really a great spot for making site-specific grower sparkling wine, from beginning of farming all the way through the bottle and really owning the whole process. So being able to get to this point and deliver things that are now fully off of the estate, which 2015 was the first year that was completely all from Escolle, and we're going to taste 2016 sparkling wines today. So second vintage in fully Escolle is really exciting for us, because the 10 years prior we're very proud of, but the goal was always to get on property, and we never wanted to make that transition before the vineyard was ready. We started it in 12 and kind of stepped up, and now where we're at, it's really fun to see the development and the maturation of the vineyard at the same time as Caraccioli as a brand is honing out some of the finer points of which blocks to use for sparkling wine and which blocks to use for still wine and like.
Well, congratulations for all of that. But this was something that you learned from your grandpa?
So my grandfather on my mother's side worked for Marisu for many years. And I actually never learned anything from grapes from him because he passed away too young. I remember being around it when I was a kid. I remember the mechanical harvesters, the all-night rush. I remember the adrenaline being around him when that was going on. And my grandmother as well was very involved in Marisu from the early 80s through, I think, like late 90s, which was outside of Soledad. And then basically that kind of obviously transitioned with my grandfather's passing, but at the same time, my father, my great uncle on my father's side, and my uncle all started this project, and with the goal of planting the 124 acres and simultaneously kind of the real impetus for the sparkling piece of this with my father's belief in it and the know-how was him meeting Michelle Salg, who had recently left Roeder Estate. We're talking about 2006 now, and Michelle retired from Roeder in 2004. So this was really his passion project as much as it was my family's passion project at the same time. Michelle didn't consult for a dozen wineries when he retired. It was really us, a project later that was in the south of England that's now into fruition called 100 Hills. And then he had like one indigenous varietal project in Turkey. So this was his baby as much as it was my family's baby. And the two of those things together, I think, led to a lot of collaboration from what the vision was from my father and uncle's side and Michelle's idiosyncratic execution all the way through.
Well, let's talk about Escolle, the vineyard that is the foundation for Caraccioli Cellars. It is not only one of the top vineyards in the Santa Lucia Highlands, but within the state of California. But set the scene for us. Talk about where Escolle is and what makes it special.
Yeah, so we're in Monterey County on the inland side of the coastal foothills, which is where the Santa Lucia Highlands lie. And it's basically a band of about 200 feet of elevation to 800 feet of elevation in terms of where the highlands, I think, ride the majority of all of the vineyards that are in there. I think there's a couple outliers. But you have a huge wind influence from the depth of Monterey Bay, which brings the prolific acidity that is definitely present in all of our wines, and really gives the structure to be able to produce 4-year tirage, site-specific method Champenois sparkling wine in a phenolic development pocket, where at 19 bricks you do have grapes that are phenolically developed and not green, and you also have a great acid structure. So being at Escolle in the northern highlands, which is the colder end of the highlands, having the influence to that wind from Monterey really made it an idyllic spot, not only for still wine, but also sparkling. The vineyard of Escolle is right outside of Gonzales. If you were to take Gonzales River Road and hit River Road, we are basically the boot in front of you. It's 124 acres, which is majority Pinot. There's about 27 acres of Chardonnay and about 5-6 acres of Gamay and Syrah each. It doubles in elevation. It goes from about 2 and change to about 5. Definitely has kind of on an exposed boot. We're 1 block south of Talbot, Sleepy Hollow, and a couple blocks north, there's some lemons between like us and McIntyre on Sanchez. So if you're looking at kind of the juxtaposition within the highlands, we're on the more northern, cooler part, which makes a lot of sense for making sparkling wine.
Absolutely. That's rarefied air over there. I mean, that's where everybody wants their grapes from.
Sparkling wine, I think it's time to taste a little. And you said it was always the goal when you started Caraccioli to become all estate. And you've had some evolution where you eventually became all estate. And you've also made an evolution in terms of the composition of your sparkling that we have in this glass. So tell us what we're sipping.
Yeah, so in your glass you have 2016 Caraccioli Cellars Blanc de Blanc. So 100% Chardonnay. All of our cuvées from 2006 to 2015 were 60% Chardonnay, 40% Pinot base. The Brut Cuvée, the Brut Rosé, that was the heart of what we were doing. And I think making single varietal sparkling wines is one of the more difficult things to be able to achieve, because in general, you're blending things at a lower bricks level. So some things don't have everything. It doesn't have a front, its middle is a little soft, the finish is weak, maybe the acid isn't as strong. You blend all those components together and you end up with a cohesive cuvée that's telling the story that you want. More rarely than that is the fact that you end up harvesting one single block from one place, and that actually, through primary vinification, you start to identify as maybe being something unique, something special that doesn't need any distinction on top of that. And this wine was the first time that we ever had a tank that we felt really had everything on its own. And it was the second year that we were a state, as at 16. So knowing exactly what we were getting, having full control, which I think is important in all winemaking, as much control as you can exhibit, but in sparkling wine is very important. The day that you harvest is more reliant on the quality that you're going to get down the end. Grapes are maturing faster at about 19 bricks, and a lot of times yesterday's an okay answer, tomorrow's an okay answer, today's the right answer. So going as much as we can on a state, being reliant on all of our own sampling, even though we sampled other vineyards when we were sourcing for the beginning of Caraccioli. It's just another level of transparency when you're the people farming it. So that level of intricacy, I think, allowed us to achieve what's in the glass. Michel had never made a Blanc de Blanc. It was one of those things where when he and I talked about it, it was Michel was a constant contrarian. His general belief structure, anything outside of it, was no. And in terms of just wine in general, and he was the most awesome, humble man. So when I said, hey, we should take, tank 2A and let's take a cage of that, keep it separate, bottle it as Blanc de Blanc, I was pretty sure I was going to go against a brick wall in terms of his buy-in. And then there was a lot of silence, and eventually he told me that there was a problem with the idea, and I was just kind of waiting for what the problem was going to be the whole time, because I knew there was something I didn't see or just wasn't thinking about. And he ultimately told me that it was the problem was it was my idea and not his.
Oh, that's funny.
And it wasn't even my idea; it was just what had rolled up.
But doing sparkling is a lot of work. I mean, people shy away from it because it requires constant tending. You're riddling and all of that. I mean, it's not like you bottle it and you're done.
No, so you're touching the bottles a lot more than you would with a still wine. Just the amount of touches is a lot higher from a process standpoint. I mean, to get it through primary, and then from a standpoint of when we separate the cuvées, we bottle the cuvées, do dosage trials on all of the individual cuvées, what will be best. I mean, red wine trials ultimately when we make the rosé, and then it goes into secondary. When it comes out of secondary, then we do the dosage trials on all of those. So you're very involved in the baby every step of the way, but you got a lot of time to do it. I mean, this is 16s, so.
Did that ever scare you, that work level on it? And not work in terms of this is hard, but this is labor intensive. Did you ever think, well, do we really want to take that on?
It wasn't really my decision. I mean, my father and uncles were already full bore into it when I came into the project. To sell it was what I started doing, and then kind of fell in love with all the other pieces, why people start wineries, the walking in the vineyard, the cellar work, the all-night harvest, all of the stuff. The romanticism became just kind of day-to-day for me, and at the same time, I loved it.
Well, I was going to say, as a big fan of bubbles, I am so glad you guys took it on. Oh, yes. It's terrific. Your product is fantastic. It's a beautiful wine.
And this is such a gorgeous wine. And the acidity is fantastic. There's a creaminess to it.
I definitely think that it showcases the structure of a skull. You've got a little bit of mid-palate softness, and then it kind of finishes on a little bit of that chalk structural finish that lingers throughout. I think it's a perfect representation of Chardonnay. I think if you tasted our Chardonnays as well as some of our peers that I sell fruit to out of a skull, there's a lot of similarities in what this wine expresses as well as what their still wines and our still wines express at 23, 24 bricks, where this is at 19. So to me, that's the goal. You want to pick a good site, and you want the site to showcase itself in all of the wines that you're making. So I think being as transparent as possible, this wine does Chardonnay from Escolle very well.
Beautifully.
I was happy about it.
And, it really seems to go beautifully with burritos, which is, we're recording this in the morning, and we started with some breakfast burritos paired with a little bubbly.
Yes, very, very nice. Just these fantastic burritos from a wonderful local market. Bubbles and burritos. That's,
right?
Why not?
Who says wine is snobby? Not at all.
No, some of the best things are not fussy.
Exactly.
So I've got another wine too, another sparkling. This is same vintage, and this is the Brut Rosé, so 2016, which has a little bit of Pinot Noir added back between fermentations. So we will ultimately figure out about what percentage we would like to add by blinding ourselves on it. We'll set up a trial of barrel of Pinot that was vinified as Caraccioli still wine Pinot. We'll do it at different introduction levels, 0.5%, 1.5%, 2%. We'll double blind ourselves, me and the winemaking team, and we'll see exactly where we feel like it's very Caraccioli-esque in terms of, I think our rosé has been very popular over the years. I think Michelle was onto something about how we make rosé and being very deliberate about it, and adhering to kind of those steps and those processes. It makes us know where we're going and how we're getting there before we even get in the car. And I think there's something to this expression being a little bit more of a Pinot Noir driven expression compared to even our Brut, and then showing the extremity next to the Blanc de Blanc is just, I think, a fun juxtaposition between the two, because they're probably on the two as tight of a range in style that I think Caraccioli is. They're probably like the two expressions that live the furthest apart from each other within our spectrum.
I just love sparkling rosés, and this is just...
This is really delicious. It's a beautiful wine.
Thank you. Definitely does a lot more red fruit to me, where the Chardonnay is more floral.
Right.
Definitely has a lot of the citrus and some of the lighter stone fruit characteristics. This does strawberries out of the glass and kind of has some of the.
But the balance is so nice. It's not. It doesn't lean towards sweet. It's nice and fresh and crisp and lovely.
Thank you. We like it to. It's been a crowd favorite, so I probably tinker with this wine the least, aside from just tinkering with the base cuvee in terms of running different clones in and out from different blocks in and out, and making it more dynamic of a base cuvee before we even add the red wine to it.
Sure. So you've had an evolution in transitioning to all estate, and now you have your own winemaking facilities. So let's talk about the new winery.
Yeah, so that happened in the glorious year of 2020.
Which we all remember is such a winner.
Yeah. We made the decision, I think it was the first week of February, maybe even the last week of January, to move our winery from Carmel Valley to downtown Gonzales into a facility that we had used for produce production prior. And it was a great opportunity to go into a space that we had full control over. It's nice when you move into a building and it already has slanted floors and drains. So
that helps.
Yeah, it definitely helps in terms of timeline. So we pulled our Fed and state application around that time frame I was talking, and then the whole world went kind of upside down, and I was just hoping that the feds and the state would keep working and actually approve it before harvest came in August. and we still had to move everything from Carmel Valley. So we had like 55 loads of sparkling wine that was on Tirage, and we did it all in the middle of the night between like 2 and 5 a.m.
Oh, really?
So they wouldn't be exposed to any heat
Wow.
or any light.
And that's a bit of a tricky drive at that time of the night from where I know where your previous facility was.
Not the straightest road. Definitely was glad that I had the guys doing it that were doing it. Carlito and Ernesto have been with us for a long time, so it was one of those things where it from the outside in, it was like, this is going to be a big job, and then 10 days later, it was done, and it was pretty seamless. So it was just one of those things where it was a stepping stone along the way, getting in the new facility, being able to set it up for the first harvest, and then we had the fire vintage, which we didn't make any red wine that year, so we got to see about half of what she could do, and then until last year, we could really kind of get a gauge on what was possible capacity, multiple different wines coming in on the same day, being able to make them, and it's exciting, and to be able to have everything in one location that's completely under control, 5 minutes from the vineyard, it's as opposed to an hour and a half ride, essentially, in a truck. So the upgrade in terms of logistics was very, very palatable through harvest when you're not running around, and I'm not running to Kashawa, and basically the vineyard is right next to each other. My triangle got a lot smaller.
So the pandemic didn't end up slowing you down much?
It just made it more stressful in the slow time and the waiting for everything to get through, but it actually... I'm glad we made the change when we made the change, and transitioned to where we are. I think it was a necessary goal. It was always to get as close to the vineyard as possible.
Yeah.
Especially kind of not making oxidative bubbles. We try to keep the preservation of the fruit to where everything's harvested into YFBs. Everything's done in the middle of the night. The first press load starts getting pressed at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. So, I mean, I'm not pressing anything basically past like 11. So it's all really cold. And the overall control that just the vineyard and the winery gave was a honing, a next level, a tinkering of what we were being able to do. And you just, I believe you always try to get better.
Absolutely.
That's the bottom line.
But like for most of your local customers, they know you from your Carmel tasting room where we are today. And this is normally a very hopping spot, right, with people coming in and tasting, and we are getting to be here before you open. So that having access to customers from not only locally, but all over the world, people visit Carmel, that they can come right down here to your tasting room is pretty cool too.
I'm a big believer that it was a pivotal decision my father made early on in terms of just, we wanted to come to where the people were, and not push the ball uphill. At the time, we were the second winery, I think, in town, and Planning Commission kind of ran me through the ringer. But nothing worth having is easy. So been here 11 years, and it's a great opportunity to be able to have people come visit you when people come in town. It's kind of like that weird thing where if you lived in Vegas, you'd have a lot of friends that came to Vegas every year, and if you wanted to go see them, you could. Where being in Monterey and having so many people come to Carmel in like this area, just Monterey County and Carmel, I have the opportunity to where, you know, Psalms are around for one reason or another. We've had Gourmet Fest, we've had Pebble Beach Food and Wine, we've had these events as well as draws from other pockets of hospitality that you're able to meet a lot of people. You're able to meet people from all over the country. You're able to meet, you know, wine enthusiasts for everywhere. People come here for Car Week. or to golf, and we found that there's a very likened customer between that which Carmel has to offer and the consumers of our wine. I think that they're similar people in general, so
Nice.
It's worked out relatively well.
Very cool.
Great.
So I just have to point out, while we still have this beautiful Brut Rosé in our glass, that for 2 years in a row, 2020 and 2021, that the Champagne and Sparkling Wine World Championship winner, Caraccioli Cellars 2015 Brut Rosé in 2021, and the 2014 Brut Rosé in 2020 have been judged to be the world's best sparkling wines by the world's best sparkling wine professionals.
Woohoo! That's big
for
stuff.
the U.S. So
For the U.S. national champions.
Yeah, it's like the national championship for Tom Stevenson. So it's something we're very excited about. Trying to get too honed in on awards. To me, it's more like micro changes through the years, but it's always very validating that you're on the right path and you're doing the right thing. And Tom Stevenson, who runs that competition with SE Avalon, they're top tier people. I've met him. Tom was the champagne editor for Decanter for like 30 years before he retired, and then he didn't have a conflict of interest and started this competition. So it's just, you're being tasted against the best champagne in the world, and he has no problem giving people a bronze. and there's something to that if, we're performing and our wines are getting golds and, at worst getting silver and competing for best of class or national championships, that we're not only kind of continuing down the path we've been on, but incrementally improving as the vineyard matures and our knowledge of the vineyard and our domain, our project overall kind of just deepens.
Well, it's got to feel really good. Congratulations. It sounds like you have enough on your plate just with the sparkling to keep you busy, but you guys are also making other wines. Would you tell us about that and how you manage it all?
Yeah, I've got a few weeks between sparkling and still harvest, so it works out pretty well.
You just weren't busy enough, right?
No, it's really a development of the whole entire estate being Escolle, and what I think would be the best representation of it through multiple different bricks levels. You start at the sparkling at 19. I'm pulling still rosé at 22 and a half. Most of the Chardonnay and Pinot gets pulled between 23 and 24. And as times went on, we've realized there was opportunity for other varietals that I think would do very well on the vineyard. The geologic composition is all granitic, metamorphic schist. It's all chular sandy loam. So you've got granite and things that work well on granite being Syrah and Gamay, really, as I've had the opportunity to transition a couple blocks, were things that I felt from a growing standpoint would work very well and would transition to the glass very well. The first was Syrah that I grafted about 2.5 acres in 18. And then between then and now, I think I've done about 10 acres between Gamay and Syrah in a very granitic band on the vineyard. I don't use any herbicides, so we use Clemens weed knife, which basically goes beneath the cordones and cuts the weeds out. It also, when it hits granite rock, breaks, bends, shatters your blade. Ooh. So I had a couple of years when we were doing that, where I was pulling lots of rocks out of specific blocks, and ultimately that's where I transitioned the Gamay Noir to, as well as the Syrah, which I think are just other things that work really well in the Highlands, in our vineyard specifically, but also it's just one of those things of what else can be done well on Escolle, with everything from Caraccioli Cellars coming from Escolle from now until forever, as far as I'm concerned. It will be the development of these varietals and these blends and figuring out what the best Pinot blend is, what the best Chardonnay blend is, and oh wow, Gamay works here. What's the how does that work? Should I be fermenting it this way, that way? And I process some, obviously, for Caraccioli Cellars, which is in your glass now. In brand process some. So did Francisco Benuelas Jr., who's Dennis at Odonata's assistant. And Sam Smith from Morgan made some under SLS. So the four of us all kind of made very different representations of Gamay out of our vineyard, and it's been really cool to kind of see where they are, because you learn a lot more from, if it was just me learning from my wine, I learn 1/4 of what I get out of tasting their 3 wines, knowing what they did, knowing how fermentation went, and it makes it more possible to farm the vineyard better, and it also makes it more possible to continue at a higher rate of speed in terms of improving what you're doing.
Sure.
You can learn more.
Well, Mary B. and I have been on this, we're on a whirlwind tour of Monterey County, talking to different winemakers, and we had the opportunity to taste with Ian Brand and taste his Gamay Noir. And I have to tell you, while your wine, his wine, equally beautiful, very different.
Yeah.
And, I would categorize yours more as a fleurie, if you're familiar with the 10 Crus of Beaujolais. And I thought his was a little bit more like Morgon. So it's interesting, in such a small area that you get such different expressions, depending on not just probably where the vineyard, the blocks of the where the vines and the blocks are, but also the winemaker's touch.
Yeah, I would say most of the difference in this Gamay between ours is all basically winemaker touch in terms of pick points. Ian picked his a few days before me, and then his is more carbonic than mine. So I definitely think his jumps out of the glass a lot more. It's a lot more lifted. Mm-hmm. It's probably more traditional Gamay. It's more Gamay-y, I guess, for Gamay, better term.
Let's coin that term.
Yeah, I think ours is a little bit more dense, a little bit more rich in the second half of the palate, which it's all of our first shots at it. And I'm happy with all of them that I've tasted, and I'm excited to have them all have Escolle on the label and showcasing this varietal out of that vineyard. And I think there's something fun to, the different interpretations and who people drew interpretation from. There's something to that, and it's cool.
It's such a good varietal. I hope it continues to grow in popularity and that people really kind of come to know this. It's a beautiful wine.
Yeah. Do you see more winemakers seeing what you all are doing, be inspired to, hey, maybe we should start making Gamay? Maybe would Santa Lucia Highlands, Monterey become known for Gamay?
So Kurt grafted a little. Kurt Williams, who has a few vineyards in the Highlands. His stepdaughter is Corey, who owns Corey. He's a great farmer, and he grafted a little bit last year, and he works with Pizzoni. So I think Mark and Jeff are going to play with a little bit of it. I don't know where it'll end up, but from his Highlands Ranch block, he has some. I actually drove it Saturday morning, and I was checking out a few different vineyards and actually cruised by to see just how everything was going in South or Middle South Highlands compared. Sometimes I feel like I don't get out of my pocket. And I think that there's definitely people interested in the momentum of other varietals. I mean, we're really heavily planted to Pinot. There was more Syrah 10 years ago. There's less Syrah now. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, you go through the ebb and flow of things. But I was actually talking to my grandma about it, and there was a decent amount of Gamay planted in the early 80s, like by Marisu, by other people
really?
Around. Yeah, they had Napa Gamay, Gamay Beaujolais, and then they had something called like Pinot 2, which was actually Pinot Droit. But they had like these different variations between Pinot and Gamay, trying to figure out what exactly would work locally. So it's been some fun conversations with me and her about me going back to Gamay, so to speak. And
Going back to Gamay.
It was kind of, I think, to me, it was because it works. And that was, first and foremost, I think it works on granite. I think it works in the climate. And then all of the other stuff that came out of it in terms of like all of our processing and seeing the differentiation is the fun and exciting part of, it's not, okay, it works. It's how do I continue to make this better? And is there applicability in other spots? And I think there is. I mean, there's granite all over the Highlands. I think it works on granite.
Well, from the consumer standpoint, I think it's a fun wine discovery. If you're one of those people who gets in the Cabernet, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, you know, just fall back on those old standbys, it's so fun to find a different food-friendly, you know, easy to drink, and yet complex wine like a Gamay Noir. This is beautiful.
Absolutely. And especially, and, you know, there's folks out there that they are just Pinophiles. They love Pinot Noir. But, you know, this is a wine that I think, you know, they get it in their glass, they're going to love it too.
It's, I haven't released it yet. It'll come
so we're getting a sneak preview.
Yeah, you are. Actually, or the Blanc de Blanc. So this is like a show of sneak previews.
I love that.
But the Gamay will be released, both the Blanc de Blanc and Gamay will be released this fall and included in some of the wine club shipments. So it's one of those things where it's, you know, the progression of it over the next couple of years will be really exciting, and see exactly how all the people pulling it. And I have 2.5 acres more coming online next year.
Cool.
Great.
Well, you're doing so much. You've got to be so busy. But we were talking before we started the interview, and we asked you, what do you do to kind of get away, have fun, relax? And you mentioned golf. So tell me about your golf game.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you got to find something in leisure that you love to do. And when I was a youth, I played golf, played high school golf and stuff. And then probably from 20 to early 30s, played a collective 10, 15 rounds. And then at some point realized I wanted to get back into it. And I'm the obsessive type of person that when I do something, I do it. So when I kind of made the decision to start playing again, it's been really fun. I've got a group of younger guys that I play with, and then I've got a group of older guys that I play with, and the day-to-day and the banter between it all is some of the funnest times that I have in getting outside of the pocket. And it's a great sport. Although I have to say,
You have a young family, and when I was first married and we were starting our family, my husband loved golf, and I kind of shut it down because I was like, you can't. This is all day, followed by burgers and beers.
You can't leave me alone.
You know,
I've got a pretty great
What's
wife.
in it for me? You know?
Now she has to listen to this podcast. She's pretty great. But it's, I've got a young family. I've got a 6-year-old Rocco, and then I've got another son on the way, due end of November.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. It might get shut down a little more, but I'm trying to get her to be bit by the bug too. So she likes to play as well. So you kind of...
then you get Rocco out there.
Oh, he loves it. He's obsessed.
Okay.
So that's the other piece of it. Rocco's obsessed. Erica's liking it, and I like it. So it's been one of those fun things we could do too on, you know, late summer night, 4:00. You can go around and play 9 holes with the 3 of us, and it's beautiful in corral, and it works out. And it's great to get outside in a different environment.
We said on this at the beginning of the show, you're 4th generation, so you've got the 5th generation.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to watch them all grow up. And my brother has 2 children, and my cousin has 3. My other cousin's getting married in a couple weeks, so I'm sure there'll be some on the way with that too. So the next generation of Caracciolis is definitely coming. It'll
be fun to see whether they get bitten by the wine bug also and carry on your tradition.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm sure some of them will, and it'll be great to see it kind of happen as it progresses.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to you on that fun young family.
We've got one last wine to taste.
Thank you. And the last wine is Syrah, also 2019. That was grafted in 18. This is all Alban Clone 1 and Alban Power Block. So from John Alban's cuttings down in Edna Valley. Actually got the cuttings from Mark at Sobranes with John Alban's blessing. And this was really my first step out of the comfort zone, in that something I thought that would work here, that had worked here, but was maybe undermarketed in weird ways. It's very hard to sell Syrah in general, domestically from a winery side. Mm-hmm. So I think regardless of the fact that the acreage had probably depleted over the last 10 to 15 years prior, I was a firm believer that it worked, and it did the cool climate thing that you love out of Syrah if you love cool climate Syrah.
Which I do. But I have to say, there's cool climate Syrahs out there that have that super meaty, bacony nose and that very, very savory character. I'm not getting that really here. I'm getting more of a, it's there, but it's not very overt. And but the acid's there too, and that's what I think a problem why people don't. It's a hard sell, because it can be a really one-dimensional, flabby wine.
Yes, there's no Syrah varies a lot in style, where it's planted, all of those things. I think. The acid makes this what it needs to be, mm-hmm. which is another reason that I thought it would work, mm-hmm. was the vineyard on a whole is a high acid vineyard, and kind of retain that freshness and structure, mm-hmm. where you've mm-hmm. got the deeper fruit, but also the savory notes that you talk about. And then I think it's kind of a dancing floor for the Monterey County herb spice basket mm-hmm. of bay laurel, chaparral. All of those things kind of live in the background, filling out the profile. And I think there's a truth to that kind of throughout our wines. And our red wines, you definitely get mm-hmm. more of that expression. You get more of the running when it's wet outside in the morning in the Chardonnay, mm-hmm. and the
mm-hmm.
Blanc de Blanc, where you get that wet pavement, the wet granite. And
mm-hmm.
but the savory characteristic, I think, is definitely a vein that runs through all of the wines from the site, but how they express themselves differently is always fun to me.
Sure. And I'm also getting some beautiful violet in the aromas.
Yeah.
It drinks purple to me.
Yes,
when
it
I
drinks
drink
purple.
this, I see purple.
I love that. Drinking in color. Yes. What color does it evoke for you?
Another yummy one. That's great.
Absolutely. And also, before we were chit-chatting before we sat down to tape this pod, and we started talking about your dogs, and you are equally as passionate about your dogs as you are wine. So tell us about your dogs.
These are other family members for sure.
Well, yeah, and
for your dad and you.
Before we found out my wife was pregnant, we put a deposit down on a dog about 3 weeks before. So all in on the training for the next.
Because you're not going to be busy or anything.
No,
might as well get a puppy.
It's perfect. It's all going to happen within the throes of harvest and then after harvest.
Of course.
So I have a dog that we rescued about 9. He's going to be 10 in a couple months. So then we brought a puppy into the fold, and it's actually Kim from the executive director of the MCVGA linked me up with this breeder outside of Modesto. She's an awesome lady, and she breeds great dogs. So it was just the perfect time for our family. So we've got this little teddy bear named Bruno in the house that's following Austin around. It's a pretty fun time.
We can talk about Bruno?
We can. We can. I want the stigma to be gone.
Well, your wife sounds incredible to be taking on a dog and pregnant and to have another little one. She sounds like
she's perfectly type A for the job.
So yeah, you're a busy guy. On a typical day, where are you? Are you in Gonzales in the vineyards? Are you in the
So
cellar?
every day is different. Like today was different, but I still kind of do my loop. Usually start at my desk, do book work in terms of like throw things out that need to get done. Any type of Excel. I can do a lot more in the morning than I can later in the day as kind of time progresses. So that usually starts first thing in the morning. Then I go to the vineyard, check the vineyard, converse with Alberto, make sure we're all on the same page. Nothing's changed from the last time we talked. Go to the winery, talk to the winemaking team, see how all of that's set up. And then a couple days a week, I'll probably bring wine to Carmel with me when I come to Carmel. I'm putting in a little home vineyard for a guy in Carmel Valley, so there's been a stop there recently. But then I usually come to Carmel in the afternoon, meet with the hospitality team, try to spend a little bit of time in the tasting room. My favorite part of COVID was not having to travel. So when that kind of happened, I realized how I could best be able to still touch as many customers as I had been, even though it was going to be differently. And what that looked like was me spending a little bit more time in the tasting room, which I would rather do than in some random state in general. So I kind of end my day here and then go home and probably tie in a few loose ends with emails and whatnot. But I run around a lot. I'm not in one spot. It's not always the same, but kind of looks like that.
So for anyone who thought that a vintner lived a life of ease and luxury, it's a lot of work. You're putting in the hours, and obviously the proof of that and the results of that are in the glass. And we've sure enjoyed getting to know you today and tasting all of these lovely wines. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been fantastic. And how can folks find you?
So we actually dropped a new website last week. So CaraccioliCellars.com is one good way to kind of a central repository for all of our information. Downtown Carmel, if you're in the area, come to the tasting room, book an appointment. We're relatively busy, but you'll have a great time. You'll get exposed to what we have. Phone number there is 831-622-7722. And I don't do the talk thing. So our reservation book is a black book that's literally all written.
Wow.
So if you
That is old school.
Yep. I'd rather talk to you on the phone than have you make a reservation. So that's the easiest way to really come in, experience the wines, and it's a good first intro for sure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing these beautiful wines. We're super excited. And I've known you for some time, so it's been really, really fun to see how things have evolved and just keep improving and improving. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you again.
Very much. Really appreciate it, ladies.
And
Cheers.
good luck to you and the winery and your family.
Yes, exactly.
Cheers. Sip, sip, hooray, Scott. Well, that's going to do it for our show today. We're so glad you found Sip Sip Hooray podcast. We thank you for listening, and we really encourage you to share our podcast with your friends.
So go to whatever podcast platform you listen to our pod on and be sure to rate us or review us. It helps other people find our podcast too. And be sure to subscribe to the pod so you don't miss another episode. But there's plenty of episodes we've got on our website from past interviews that you won't want to miss. So visit sipsiphooray.podcast.com.
And we're also, of course, on social media. You can find us at Sip Sip Hooray Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future podcasts or great finds you want to share with us, just DM us and we'll get back to you.
Thank you for listening. I'm Mary Babbitt. Cheers and Sip Sip Hooray.
Cheers to you, Mary Orland. Sip Sip Hooray.